have an incredible co-host, Carol Van Zant Jones, and she has an incredible company, and you started all on your own, correct?
That's correct.
And if you want to just kind of get into a little bit of your backstory, maybe like your career backstory before starting the company, I'd love to learn a little bit more about that too.
Well, sure. Thank you for having me, first of all, Caroline. Yeah. As a young child growing up, I had very strong women in my family. My mother was reared, her mother passed away when she was just an infant, and so she was reared by her mother's sister. Her name was Aline McMahon, and Aline was born in 1904, and she was a very bright, loving young woman who excelled in the music industry, and she taught music in the church choir, primarily the children's choir, and this was in Dallas. And anyway, and she got her master's degree as a young woman, and then pursued her career teaching music to young children. That was something that women did not do, especially those that were born in 1904.
Yeah.
Kind of out of the box. My mother and my father married. My father was from Fort Worth, and my father's family had strong women as well. His two sisters were both educators as well. One held a PhD in chemistry and led the chemistry department at Texas Wesleyan.
Wow.
And the other was my Aunt Nell, and she was the head of the library at Texas Wesleyan as well. She also taught library science at TCU. So I come from a family that's heavy on strong women and strong educators. I grew up with this environment, and anyway, it was a fun life as a child. I went to TCU and got a degree there.
What did you study at TCU?
Psychology and business. Anyway, then I married and then had my children, both Curtis and then Anna. And luckily for me, I was able to stay at home with my children when they were young, and I consider that a privilege. As time went on and the kids grew up, life changed a bit, and I found myself in the midst of a divorce situation, and so I really needed to get back into the workforce. And so in doing so, I took on a job with a company that rented equipment to cities and municipalities, the oil and gas industry, and construction industry. Those were the primary focuses.
Was that your first dabble in like oil and gas?
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Yes.
Okay. Knowing what you do now, that's wow. Okay.
So I did that for a few years and learned that I really enjoyed the oil and gas industry. And my manager, the gentleman that hired me, whom I'm still friends with, he went on to other avenues in his life. And as he did, then I realized that it was probably a good time to branch out and go solely into the oil and gas industry. So I gave my resume to a couple of gentlemen in the oil and gas industry that were very well connected. Mm-hmm. And with that resume, I landed a job that put me right smack dab in the middle of the oil and gas industry, selling water transfer and pit lining services. Then shortly after that, the oil and gas industry took a nosedive. And in 2009, the company I was working for closed their doors in the Barnett Shale. As they closed their doors, then that meant there were a lot of very talented and well-trained people that were kind of floating around in the region without work. And I had some customers that I had developed relationships with, and they were interested in some containment. At that time, it was hard to find the right kind of containment for the oil and gas industry because it needed to be easily transported, and it needed to be lightweight and durable. And anyway, I reached out to a friend whom I knew was in the industry from a tarpon awning perspective, visited with him, and together we put together some prototypes and tried a few things. As it turns out, he put together an amazing design, and I got to put it out on location and try it out and do all kinds of fun things with it, and that launched what we call now VMATs. We continued on with that, serving our customers in the Barnett Shell, and then before we knew it, our customers were moving into the Eagleford Shell. As that happened, they invited us to join them, which was a huge honor. As we did that, we had to find ways to make that move. And so we bought some land in the Eagleford. We were actually working out of a container at first on this one little 3-acre lot. Well, I guess 2.5-acre lot. Anyway, we've now built a building and a shop, and we now have about 13 acres there. But nonetheless, it was, just dirt. And actually, I remember scooping up a little spoonful of dirt and putting it in a Ziploc bag and carrying it with me for about 6 months everywhere I went, because that was the first dirt that I actually owned. But anyway, so then we started working in the Eagleford. That was some fun and wild times. Things were just going in all different kinds of directions. And Curtis, my son, he was finishing up at Trinity University about that time. So that was about 2012. And during the summers, Curtis and some of his buddies would work for us. But after he graduated, he jumped on board and came to work for us full time. So that was 2012. And then shortly after that, we had customers doing more work in the Permian Basin. I had resisted going to the Permian Basin because at that time, most of the emphasis in the oil and gas industry was in the Barnett and the Eagleford. But as the oil and gas prices rose, the Permian began to percolate, really. Mm-hmm. So then we found a shop in the Permian and opened up. And then almost immediately after that, we opened up another shop in Oklahoma. So we were blowing and going, about 2014. We had...
And did anyone else make anything similar to y'all? Did y'all get a patent? How did that kind of stuff work?
Yes, Mark Matson got a patent. Okay. He was the one that designed it. And I threw it out there and, gave him feedback on it and such. But it was his design, but we got the benefit of playing with it out in the field and trying this and add a handle, and the flaps need to go this way, and the Velcro. The part of the story I think he likes to tell, too, is that in designing this, one of the things that has made it very easy for our employees to use, because the containments they're huge and they break down. And so when they're all rolled up and, stored, it's hard to tell what is, by the different sizes, because you have to have different sizes to go under different equipment. So the best way I knew to do this was to color code them. Well, of course, that color coding goes back into my years of stay-at-home mom, because back at those days of my life, we color coded everything.
Yeah, you gotta be creative and get organized.
You gotta get creative and organized. And so, I applied some of my mommy skills into the oil and gas industry. And so we color code a lot of things. 2014, we were blowing and going, and then there was another oil field crash.
And that was right after Oklahoma, after y'all got...
Yeah, well, we opened up the Oklahoma yard probably 2012-ish. Okay. Anyway, but 2014, the oil fields took a nosedive. So in 2015, we had idle assets in all regions, all 4 regions. And the one region I really wanted to open up was an East Texas, Louisiana region. So we decided this was probably a good time because there was plenty of talent in the region, and then we had assets. So that's a perfect time to take a leap of faith and open up a yard. We had some customers in that region that were doing some work, not a lot, but some work. So we decided we would take that leap of faith. So we moved some assets, pulled a little bit from each region and moved it over there and opened up a new yard, hired some good, talented people, and then that yard started up. And so anyway, it has been a really big contributor to our bottom line. That's a fun story to tell in this whole picture because it was kind of it was clearly a leap of faith. And where some companies would scale back, we decided, no, we're not going to scale back. We're just going to spread out.
So is there any competition out there? Because y'all made a really unique product.
Yes. We set the bar for the containment industry.
And I'm sure some people were like, I want a piece of this.
Yeah. And they did, and they do. And we had a really good time initially because there was very few competitors in that space. But as it turns out now, there's plenty of competition. And so our prices are very competitive. We have to be very competitive with our service and our pricing on our service as well. And we have to always come up with something new.
According to Forbes 2 years ago, 15% of the industry is female. And then according to Google, currently 23% is female in the energy, oil, and gas industry. How do you think we can continue to increase? Because it sounds like you've brought a lot of creativity to the industry and great ideas that weren't there in the first place. And I think that's just something that needs to continue to happen. How would you think that could continue to happen and continue to get that number to grow more?
Well, that's a good question, Caroline. I am surprised that it is as high of a percentage as what you just said, 15 and now 23%.
Do you say that because of what you see out there?
Because of my, yes, because of my experiences.
Do you think there's more like males in the leadership roles and maybe the numbers higher on the maybe not as leadership roles for females?
That may be the case. There are groups, Heart Energy is one that has they do a seminar and a convention specifically for women in the oil and gas industry, which is very nice. And then they did this, I think the last 2 years, maybe even 3 years, and they'll identify some women leaders in the oil and gas industry. Another thing is, just for women to step up on committees. The Permian Basin has several organizations, and when women join those organizations and participate on those committees, then yes, you see those women in the oil and gas industry. Typically, those committees are headed up by men and the local people of the region. I think there are more women engineers. I know when I first started in the oil and gas industry, I was really quite a novelty, showing up on location with the pink hard hat. And that was not very common. But now there are more women, and usually there'll be more women engineers, which I applaud the women, especially the young women going through school and choosing petroleum engineering. You go, girl.
Yeah.
So I do see more women in the frac vans, and it's evolving. It definitely is evolving. And so I'm glad to hear that's reported at 23%. But yes, we do need more.
So going kind of back into your industry, what are some challenges that new entrepreneurs might be facing as they enter the oil and gas and energy industry?
New entrepreneurs will have challenges gaining that safety history that we spoke about earlier. And another big challenging factor in the oil and gas industry is the fact that it is a very cyclical industry. In April of 2020, we saw oil prices drop as low as a negative $37 a barrel. People were having to pay someone to take and store oil for them. 2020 was probably one of the hardest years in the oil and gas industry, probably ever. I am really a newcomer to the oil and gas industry. I've been in the industry since 2009, or actually 2008, but on my own in 2009. In talking with those that are my age or older and have made the oil and gas industry their career, they speak about 2020 as being some of the hardest times they have ever encountered. There were some pretty hard times in the 80s. There was a long, prolonged period of time when oil prices were very low, and that was very hard for the oil and gas industry. So one of the things that I think is really important for an entrepreneur is to build a business plan that can expand and contract. And when I say that, I mean you need to be able to obviously expand as the market demands, when they need more stuff and more people and more time. And the oil and gas industry will do that. And it can be very, very demanding. But then, and almost in an overnight way, it can shut down. And then here you are with all this stuff and all these people. So you have to build your plan in such a way that you can lay off people, sell off assets or whatever in order to keep afloat during those very lean times. The lean times for us have been, well, they've been very lean. But what we did, and I didn't realize this going into it, I didn't realize this really had to be this way. Prior to launching on my own in the oil and gas industry, I was advised, don't go there. The oil and gas industry is so cyclical. It is so hard. And of course, you know, I just plunged in there and did it anyway. But what I learned is that when I saw the cycles cycling down, I paid attention, and we quit hiring. We quit buying new stuff. We just pretty much put the brakes on expenses, and you almost have to do that. We do that, and then also hopefully you don't have to do layoffs, but ultimately we have had some layoffs in our history. And then of course when things pick up, we call those people back to come to work for us. In the downturn in 2014, it was 2015, that's when we opened up the East Texas yard. So instead of cutting back, I think that was a time when we were able to let natural attrition happen. So our team, we didn't have a whole lot of work, so people would go to other industries where they could get more hours or whatever. So through natural attrition, we lost some people, employees that way, which helped our bottom line. But we also were able to spread our assets out to a brand new region and start something new. And that was just fun to do in a, kind of a depressing downturn time. It's fun to do something new and creative. And so we started up in East Texas with just a skeleton crew, and we helped them out from our Fort Worth yard. We would move people back and forth when they had jobs that needed extra people. But I think the real skinny, if I had to drill down to what's the biggest advice, and that is a new startup company or any company in the oil and gas industry needs to be scalable. It needs to be able to build up and to contract based upon the market.
Was there ever a time in your company's life that you thought, what have I done? Or I should get out of this, or I can't do this? And how did you power through that?
Well, 2020, when the oil prices dropped down to -37, I really was in that, where do we go from here now? There was a lot of talk about, there isn't work, there isn't very much work. And how do you keep your doors open? How do you stay afloat? And, we had scaled down to the bare minimum, and I kept saying, can't we carve back some more? Can't we, and there's like, well, if we do that, then we really need to close these doors. One thing that we did do during this 2020 year is we pulled our employees out of our Oklahoma region, although we still have a yard in Oklahoma, but we don't have it manned by employees at this time. We are seeing some more activity in Oklahoma. We are starting to get some calls in that region. And so I can see that we might, open that up again. But that's part of that scaling down. There were other regions, and if it had gone on any longer, it would have been the next region and the next region. Yeah. And so ultimately it's a matter of, you just find ways to scale back. It got very difficult in 2020.
And what about earlier on in the more infancy of the company? Was there ever a time when you were just
at my wit's end?
Yeah.
Yes. Especially during the beginning. It began to grow. I really didn't envision this company to be as big as it was. At one point in time, we had over 120 people employed, and I never anticipated that. There were times when I felt like I had bitten off more than I could chew because there was just so much demand, and I didn't know how to keep up with it. One of the things that I think is critical is to have managers in place that are very capable and very committed individuals. It takes time to weed through people. And I also have had to learn the hard way that with a startup company, there's all kinds of things that a manager would need to be able to do. They have to wear a bazillion different hats. And that is a gift and a talent. But that same person may not be happy in an established company's management program. So where a person may shine in your startup organization, there may not be a place for them in a mature organization.
What do y'all have it for the future of VZ Environmental?
Well, that's a good question. Every time I am asked that question, I look into an imaginary crystal ball and it's not there. I do see, I've always said I really can't see out much more than 6 months. And that's always been the case because the industry is so cyclical. It is very difficult to do that. But I do think that the industry and the price of oil and gas right now are on the rise and are steady. And I do think that we are looking and embracing a strong 2021. And I'm so thankful for that because 2020 was absolutely brutal.
We're always trying to keep our ear to the ground and learn more about how we can be better. What is something that you'd like to see or a difference that the insurance industry could make as an improvement?
In the insurance industry, there are so many disclaimers. I have to have insurance, but I feel very uneducated many times on what I have, the policies I do have. When there's an accident or there's flood damage or there's any number of things, I think this and that are covered. And then I go back to the policy and it's like, well, not exactly. So that's a piece that I think is really hard for a person not in the industry. And it's an industry I don't really want to know a lot about.
Yeah, no, I get it.
But I have to know a lot about it. It puts insurance agents in a difficult predicament because they have to sell a product and the person that they're selling it to really doesn't want to know about it, but they really need to know about it.
It's like the education aspect, the communication aspect, and then really just kind of like the knowledge on so that you're not having to wonder, am I covered for this crap? Got it. Okay. Right. And then obviously when you're saying like your umbrella pricing, maybe more education on, hey, by the way, the surge is 52 to 160% right now. So you don't get those surprises on like your your renewal the day before kind of thing.
Yeah, the day before renewal.
Carol, thank you so much for your time. And how can people get connected to you?
Oh, you can go to our website. It's VZEnvironmental.com.
Awesome. Well, Carol, thank you so much for your time.